One of the first things that comes to mind when it comes to the history of Japan is the samurai. The weapons used by the samurai, the armor they wore, their war techniques and their philosophy of life have been curious for years. So how did this institution disappear in Japan? Have you ever thought about it? Or the last samurai film, which many of us enjoyed watching, was inspired by which event? In this section, we will tell you about the series of events that brought the end of the samurai. 1853. The year 1853 was a turning point for Japan. Until then, the Japanese had a strict attitude towards Europeans coming to their islands from outside. The Japanese government kept its harbors closed to all Europeans except Dutch merchants who were not engaged in missionary activities. But 4 American ships approaching off Edo in 1853 changed everything. The Americans wanted to use Japan as a stepping stone to denigrate China, so they threatened the Tokugawa shogunate, which ruled Japan, and got it to sign the Kagagawa Treaty, which opened Japanese ports to foreigners and rapidly turned the country into an open market. When Britain, France and Russia, whose mouths watered when they saw the concessions made by the USA, became partners in the cake, Japan turned into a semi-colony. The impotence into which the shogunate fell gradually increased the dissatisfaction of the people. This dissatisfaction soon turned into a hurricane. Choshu on the island of Honshu, Satsuma on the island of Kyushu and the Tosa houses, which would later be added to them, led the opposition to the shogunate. These houses and those who supported them united around a new national idea inspired by their own history. This idea was sloganized as "Long live the Emperor! Down with the barbarians!" The emperor, who resided in Kyoto, continued to exist symbolically, isolated from the administration of the country, with no political influence but as a religious authority. Komi, who was emperor at the time, was opposed to the entry of foreigners from the very beginning and wanted to expel them from the country. The emperor was encouraged by the fact that the opponents of the shogun saw uniting around him as a way out. Komi issued an edict in 1863 to expel foreigners from the country. With this move, the opponents revolted. At first, it seemed that the Tokugawa shogunate would easily suppress this resistance, but the color of the situation changed rapidly. The opponents prevailed. Fearing that the situation would worsen, Shogun Yoshinobu abdicated in 1867, announcing that he had transferred all powers to Mutsuhito, the Emperor Meiji, who had succeeded his father on the throne at the time. But the fanfare did not end there. The dissidents who entered Kyoto, believing that the power would not fully pass to the emperor as long as the Tokugawas existed, squeezed the Tokyo-centered Khanate, then called Edo, even harder. Soon after, Yoshinobu, who handed over his powers, wanted to break the pressure on him, and the war called Bushin began. 15 Yoshinobu, who left Edo with 15,000 men, marched to Kyoto on the pretext of saving the emperor from the rebels. The armies faced each other in the south of the city. When Yoshinobu saw that his men were not willing to fight against the emperor, he retreated to Osaka Castle. Seeing that the shogunate had completely disintegrated, the emperor marched with his supporters to Edo in 1868 and entered the city without a clash. The revolutionaries who supported the emperor achieved victory. Emperor Meiji pressed the button to make radical changes as soon as he took power. As a result of his relentless modernization efforts, Japanese culture, language, dress and society changed rapidly and drastically. Many samurai were uncomfortable with this, and felt that the emperor was going against the philosophy that had brought him to power. In particular, the abolition of feudalism in 1871 caused a great reaction from the local dynasties in the country. This move was also dysfunctionalizing the institution of samurai, because they were the servants of the river lords, and if the lords became dysfunctional, there would be no need for them. The leader of the Satsuma house, Saigo Takamori, showed the harshest reaction to the change. Saigo was one of the important nobles who supported Meiji's restoration and fought for the emperor. Although he adapted to the newly established order with his samurai, he still retained his traditional side. Meiji, on the other hand, intended to get rid of these forces that had brought him to the top. So it was time for the revolution to eat its own children. As the days passed, Meiji and Saigo grew apart. They disagreed, especially about waging war on Korea. While Saigo wanted war, the emperor was against it. Saigo left all his duties in protest against the situation and returned to the dynastic center Kagoshima with his loyal samurai. Returning to his hometown, Saigo established a special academy known as Shigako. In addition to traditional samurai training, he also trained in modern methods. Disgruntled samurai in the country gradually gathered at his door. Even the Bali appointed from the center to the region respected him. 1876. By this time, Saigo had become strong enough to become an alternative to the central government forces in the region. The emperor continued to restrict the samurai's sphere of action a little more at every step by law. He took away their salaries, their authority to carry weapons in the open, and their ability to execute those who disrespected them. The emperor's desire to change this order, which was a kind of caste system, was of course to the detriment of the samurai. Those who gathered in Kagoshima attacked the government forces and convinced Saigo to be their leader. One of the reasons for the rebels' actions was the alleged assassination attempt on their leader by the central government. Thus, in 1877, the last resistance of the samurai began. Saigo stated that he wanted to talk to the emperor and headed to the capital with his men. He had 12,000 samurai, 200 artillerymen and about 60 cannons at his disposal. His army was partially modernized. The general strength of the newly modernized imperial army was 57,000, including 450 cavalry, 46,000 infantry, 5,000 emperor's guards, 1,500 engineers, 900 coastal artillery, 2,700 field artillery and 480 railway guards. The empire had more than 100 cannon throughout the country and 18,000 police. Saigo set out in late January in the Black Winter of 1877. His vanguard reached the critical Kumamoto Castle on the 19th of February and besieged it. The main army arrived in front of the castle on the 22nd of February. When the 4,000 men in the castle put up a better defense than expected, the samurai broke the ice, dug trenches and took up positions. With men arriving left and right, House Satsuma's strength swelled to 20,000, but the samurai had to hold a large area to prevent help from coming to the siege. The imperial army was not idle. The troops embarked on ships arrived on Kyushu Island under General Yamagata. 9,000 on the 4th of March, the army landed from Ariake Bay, northwest of Kumamoto, and attacked Tamarazuka, where the battle would rage for days. 1 to 2 a few days later, several companies of imperial troops landed at Kagoshima, Saigo's center. The samurai had not left enough men here, so it soon fell to the emperor's forces. A force of 4,000 men was also landed from Yatsushiro to flank the besieging forces. This force took Miyonahara on the 19th of March and struck Satsuma's troops in its wake. Realizing that he could not take the castle with the imperial forces coming to his aid, Saigo withdrew and divided his troops into 3 groups. The first group was sent to take Kagoshima, while the other groups settled in Hitoyoshi and Nobioka. Fighting continued throughout the month of May, during which time the imperial armies grew stronger and the samurai grew weaker, forced to fight in primitive conditions. Although their centers failed to take Kagoshima and lost Hitoyoshi at the end of May, they continued to resist. Saigo again moved to Miyakonojo, a critical point, and continued to lead the guerrilla movement. The imperial generals intended to take it and split the resistance in 2. They reinforced their forces so that they could attack the city from different directions. 25 an attack force of up to 000 men marched on Miyakonojo in mid-August and took it on the 24th. Saigo led his men into Miyazaki, but the close pursuit forced him to retreat to Nobioka, the last major stronghold he held. Imperial forces pursued him and overran town after town. The samurai, now numbering as few as 10,000, abandoned the city as the Imperial Japanese army moved rapidly north. 14 on August 14, Imperial troops captured Nobioka. In addition to the existing forces, troops were landed in Oita and Seiki to the north. The aim was to give the rebel samurai no place to flee. General Yamagata Arimoto's men fought from the 15th to the 18th, pinning the samurai on Mount Enadake. Saigo Takamori convened the war council for the last time. Everyone admitted despair, but the leaders were unwilling to surrender because they wanted to protect Saigo until death. Saigo then considered taking his closest men and leaving in secret, believing that this was the only way to save the lives of those who had kept him company. On August 19, Seiga, with his loyal men Kurino, Murata, Beppu, Hemi, and a few hundred bouncers, broke through the enemy lines and disappeared into the fog. The remaining 8,000 or so soldiers had no choice but to surrender piece by piece. The Satsuma Rebellion had been crushed, but the news of Seigu's breakthrough and disappearance became the talk of the country. Some were surprised, some were happy, some were worried. The worried party was the palace in Edo. How did Seiga break the siege with a handful of men? Where did he go? These questions had to be answered. Otherwise, Seiga could turn into a hero and become a symbol for those who were uncomfortable with the administration. Troop deployment to the island of Kyushu was accelerated. While everyone was looking for Saigo, he appeared in his hometown of Kagoshima at the beginning of September. His group had grown to 500 people, including those who joined on the road. Although the samurai tried to take the city at first, they failed to do so and retreated to the tree-covered Shiroyama Hill and held it. They took every precaution to prevent what happened on Mount Enadake from happening. They surrounded the samurai and set up barricades. They placed their cannons on the bastions and directed their nanlu to Shiroyama Hill. 30,000 men focused their attention on a single point in order not to lose 500 men. On the 10th of September the bombardment began, raining cannonballs from the sky on a tiny area. The samurai fought back, albeit feebly. But they were now running low on ammunition, and by the 23rd they had lost more than 200 of their comrades. That day a call was made for the unconditional surrender of Numbergo. But the call went unanswered. It was clear that the samurai would continue their desperate resistance. 24 at dawn on the 24th of September, the Japanese Imperial Forces launched another naval-supported artillery barrage, this time more intense and powerful than the others, followed by an all-out advance of the infantry in the direction of the samurai's hiding place. The samurai continued their defense under a hail of bullets. In the following minutes, Saigo Takamori was hit by a bullet and severely wounded. The last samurai fell to the ground, dying. Now the rebellion was over. Hemi Giurshada rushed to his master's aid to fulfill his last duty. Seigo was going to commit seppuku and end his life. As he took his katana and disemboweled him, Hemi separated his master's head from his body. Upon Seigun's death, the remaining Satsuma samurai carried out a suicide attack against the imperial forces and walked to their death and tasted death one by one. With the suppression of the Satsuma Rebellion, the modern imperial army proved itself, while the era of the samurai was closed, never to be opened again.